Imagine the sensation of cool, wet earth slicking against your palms. It is a grounding, heavy feeling, grey and dense, spinning beneath the pressure of your hands. There is a hum in the air, a low, rhythmic vibration of a heavy stone wheel turning on its axis, maintaining a perfect hypnotic momentum. You press your thumbs into the centre of the spinning mound, and the clay yields, rising up like a living thing, responding to your warmth and your intent. The water acts as a lubricant, turning the friction into a silky glide, coating your skin in a fine slip of mud. It smells of rain on dry pavement, of deep riverbanks, of the very bedrock of the world. Watch as the walls of the vessel pull upward, thinning, defying gravity through the centrifugal force of the spin. It is a dance between the centripetal force of your hands pushing in and the motion of the wheel pushing out. In this moment, there is no noise from the outside world. There are no deadlines, no demands, no ticking clocks. There is only the mesmerizing rotation of the clay, the steady rhythm of your breath, and the ancient tactile dialogue between human touch and the soil of the earth. The clay is patient. It waits for you. It holds the shape of your calmness, smoothing out the rough edges of the day into a perfect symmetrical circle. You're entering a space of deep learning and deeper rest. Listen closely to what I'm about to tell you. You do not need to try to remember any of this. The conscious mind, the part of you that analyzes and worries, is allowed to sleep now. You have permission to drift away. Your subconscious mind is a vast, silent library with infinite shelves. It will listen to these words. It will absorb these 101 truths about the art of pottery while you rest. There is no test. There is no effort. There is only the flow of the story, washing over you like warm water. Just let go. Sink into the comfort of the darkness. This art form, this shaping of the earth begins not with the wheel, but with the fire. Deep in the Jiangxi province of China, inside the Xianrendong Cave, archaeologists uncovered the fragments of the world's oldest pottery. These shards date back 20,000 years to the height of the last ice age. Picture the world then, a place of biting cold and endless glaciers. Humanity did not yet farm. We were wanderers, hunters, gatherers. And yet, in the flickering orange light of a campfire, someone took a handful of mud, shaped it into a crude bowl, and cast it into the flames. It was likely an accident at first, a discovery that the soft, yielding river mud could be transformed by heat into stone. This was the first time humanity created a new material that did not exist in nature. Before the first seed was sown for agriculture, we were potters, creating vessels to hold our food, to warm our broths, creating a permanent mark of our presence against the freezing dark. For thousands of years, these vessels were built slowly, coil by coil. Imagine the patience required to roll long snakes of clay between the palms, stacking them in rings, one atop the other, then smoothing the walls with a wet stone or a scrap of leather. But then, a revolution occurred in the dust of Mesopotamia. Around 4,000 years before the Common Era, the concept of the wheel was born. It was not originally used for transport, but for this, for the clay. A heavy stone or wooden disc spun by hand or kicked by foot harnessed the energy of rotation. This invention introduced kinetic energy to art. Suddenly, a pot could be thrown in minutes rather than built in days. It allowed for symmetry that the eye finds deeply soothing, a perfection of form that mimics the roundness of the sun, the moon, and the iris of the eye. The potter's wheel is one of the few machines from antiquity that remains virtually unchanged today, a testament to the perfection of its simple, circular motion. The material itself, the clay, is not merely dirt. It is the result of geological time, the slow erosion of mountains over millions of years. Feldspar, granite, and igneous rocks are ground down by wind and water, carried by rivers, and deposited in quiet, still beds where they settle and decompose. Consider the white clay known as kaolin. It is named after Guilin, a high ridge in China where it was first mined. This is the primary ingredient of porcelain. Kaolin is stubborn. It is less plastic than other clays, difficult to shape, requiring a masterful hand. But it is pure. When fired, it becomes the colour of snow, translucent enough to let the light of a candle glow through its walls. It is the skeleton of the mountain, purified and reformed into a delicate cup that rings like a bell when tapped with a fingernail. Once the clay is shaped and dried to a bone-hard state, it must face the kiln. This is the moment of transformation, a process known as sintering. In the intense heat, reaching temperatures over 1,300 degrees Celsius, the particles of silica and alumina within the clay begin to melt and fuse together. It is a molecular metamorphosis. The water, chemically bound within the crystal structure of the clay, is driven off in a rush of steam. The object shrinks, tightening in on itself, becoming dense and vitreous. It enters the fire as fragile dried mud that would dissolve in a rainstorm, and it emerges as a stone that can last for 10,000 years. It is the closest humanity can come to geological alchemy, speeding up the processes of the Earth's crust from eons to hours. To seal this stone, to make it watertight and smooth to the touch, we cloak it in glass. This is the science of glazing. A glaze is a mixture of silica, which is essentially ground glass or sand, combined with a flux to help it melt, and stiffeners to keep it from running off the pot like water. When you dip a bisque-fired pot into a bucket of glaze, it looks chalky, matte, and dull. The magic happens in the darkness of the kiln. As the heat rises, the powder liquefies, coating the clay in a molten sheet. It bubbles and boils, and then as it cools, it freezes into a permanent glossy skin. The chemistry is precise. A little too much iron, and the glaze turns black. A little less, and it becomes the warm yellow of honey. It is liquid chemistry suspended in time, a permanent wetness that will never dry. Among the most celebrated of these chemical reactions is the colour known as celadon. Originating in China, these glazes were designed to mimic the precious stone jade. They range from a pale, ghostly blue to a deep olive green. The colour comes from a tiny amount of iron oxide fired in a reduction atmosphere, meaning the kiln is starved of oxygen. The fire, desperate for air, pulls oxygen atoms out of the clay and glaze minerals themselves, chemically changing the iron from red to green. In the quiet courts of the Song dynasty, celadon vessels were prized above gold. They were often covered in a network of fine cracks known as crackle, a deliberate imperfection that occurred because the glaze cooled faster than the clay body beneath it. It creates a texture like shattered ice over a frozen lake, a pattern of chaos captured within a perfect form. This appreciation for the broken and the mended finds its highest philosophy in the Japanese art of kintsugi. When a cherished ceramic bowl is broken, it is not discarded. Instead, the fragments are collected with reverence. The potter or artisan rejoins the pieces using a lacquer mixed with powdered gold, silver or platinum. The result is a vessel that is more beautiful for having been broken. The cracks are not hidden. They are highlighted, tracing the history of the object in glittering veins of gold. It is a profound statement on existence, that breakage and repair are part of the history of an object, rather than something to disguise. A kintsugi bowl teaches us that scars can be the strongest and most precious part of our character, shining brightly against the dark ceramic. The scale of pottery can range from a thimble-sized teacup to an army of thousands. Buried beneath the soil of Xi'an lies the Terracotta Army, the silent guardians of the first emperor of China, Qin Shi Huang. Discovered by farmers digging a well in 1974, this subterranean garrison contains over 8,000 soldiers, 130 chariots, and hundreds of horses. Each figure is life-sized. Each figure is unique. The artisans did not use moulds for the faces. Instead, they modelled individual features, moustaches, top knots, expressions of stoicism or ferocity, onto every single soldier. They were originally painted in bright hues of red, blue, pink and gold, though the colours have faded to the grey of the fired earth. For over 2,000 years they have stood in formation in the dark, a ceramic empire that never sleeps, protecting a tomb that has never been opened. While the emperor's army stood still, other pottery travelled the known world. In the ancient Mediterranean, the primary vessel of commerce was the amphora. These tall, two-handled jars were the shipping containers of antiquity. They were designed with a distinct pointed bottom, not to stand on a table, but to be stacked efficiently in the hull of a wooden ship, nestled in beds of sand or straw to prevent them from rolling. Millions of them traversed the seas, filled with olive oil from Attica, wine from Chios, or fish sauce from Spain. They are the markers of ancient trade routes. Shipwrecks are found today not by the rotting wood of the hull, which dissolves, but by the mounds of amphorae that spill across the ocean floor, preserving the shape of the cargo long after the civilization that sent it has crumbled to dust. Finally, consider the dramatic immediacy of raku firing. Developed in 16th century Japan for the tea ceremony, raku is a process of elemental shock. Unlike other pottery that cools slowly over days in the kiln, raku ware is removed while it is still glowing red hot. Using long iron tongs, the potter pulls the vessel from the fire, the heat radiating in waves, and places it directly into a container of combustible material, sawdust, dried leaves, or paper. The heat of the pot instantly ignites the material. The container is sealed, trapping the smoke. This sudden thermal shock and the thick carbon smoke impregnate the clay, turning unglazed areas a matte, velvety black and causing the glazes to crackle and shift in unpredictable metallic colours. It is a collaboration with chance. No two raku pots are ever the same. Each one bears the unique signature of the fire and the smoke, a frozen moment of intense transformation. From the intense, chaotic heat of the raku fire, we drift into the cooling silence of the aftermath. Imagine the kiln opening, the heat escaping in a shimmering wave that distorts the air, revealing the vessels resting inside. As they meet the cool air of the studio, a phenomenon known as crazing begins. Listen closely in the quiet of your mind. It is a sound like distant wind chimes, or the delicate tinkling of ice settling in a glass. Ping, ping, ping. This is the glaze contracting, shrinking just slightly faster than the clay body underneath. It creates a network of microscopic cracks, a spiderweb of tension that catches the light like the facets of a diamond. In the world of Celadon, these cracks are not flaws. They are the ice crackle, a celebrated texture that mimics the freezing of a winter lake. The light penetrates the glassy surface and reflects off these fractures, giving the pot a depth that feels endless, as if you are looking into deep, frozen water. It is a reminder that beauty often lies in the tension between hot and cold, expansion and contraction, the solid and the shattered, and as this knowledge settles, your breathing slows, matching the rhythm of the cooling earth. From this translucent depth, our vision shifts to the profound, aching blue of cobalt. Picture a white porcelain bowl, pristine and milky, decorated with sweeping brushstrokes of deep indigo. This is the blue and white that travelled the Silk Road, a marriage of Chinese clay and Persian pigment. The cobalt mineral, when dug from the earth, is a dull greyish rock. It reveals its secret nature only under the intense heat of the kiln. It is one of the few colours that can survive the highest firing temperatures without burning away. Imagine the artisan's brush, loaded with this grey mixture, gliding over the absorbent powdery surface of the unfired clay. The clay drinks the pigment instantly. There is no room for error, no erasing, only the confident fluid motion of the hand. When fired, the grey blooms into a sapphire intensity, a blue that rivals the deepest parts of the ocean or the twilight sky just before the stars appear. It is a colour that feels ancient and royal, a visual frequency that calms the nervous system, drawing the eye into a meditative state of focus and infinite calm. Before the brush can ever touch the surface, and indeed before the clay ever meets the wheel, there is the ritual of preparation known as wedging. Visualize a heavy, amorphous lump of raw clay on a sturdy wooden bench. The potter's hands work in a rhythmic, rocking motion, pushing the clay away and rolling it back over and over again. This is not merely mixing, it is a way of organizing the chaotic particles of the earth into alignment. It is a spiral motion, often called chrysanthemum kneading in Japan, because the clay begins to look like the petals of a flower folding inward. The purpose is to drive out air bubbles, tiny pockets of atmosphere trapped in the mud. If left inside, these bubbles would expand in the heat of the kiln and shatter the pot. So the potter pushes, rocks and rolls, a physical mantra of compression. The clay becomes smooth, consistent and dense. It is a mesmerizing cycle of exertion and release, a heartbeat of labor that prepares the material for the transformation to come. The mind of the potter quiets during this process, the repetitive motion inducing a trance state where the only reality is the texture of the cool, damp earth under the palms. Once the clay is thrown on the wheel and begins to dry, it reaches a fleeting, magical state known as leather hard. Imagine the texture of a firm block of cheddar cheese, or smooth, cold chocolate. The clay is no longer soft and squishy. It holds its shape with a stubborn firmness, yet it is still damp enough to be carved. This is the sculptor's favourite moment. A sharp metal tool slices through the surface, and the clay curls away in long, satisfying ribbons like peeling an apple in one continuous strip. The friction is perfect, a smooth resistance that allows for crisp, clean lines. It is at this stage that the potter trims the bottom of the bowl, turning it upside down to carve out the foot ring, the pedestal on which the vessel will stand. The shavings pile up around the wheel like autumn leaves, soft and cool to the touch. It is a subtractive process, revealing the final form that was hiding inside the excess weight. The vessel becomes lighter, lifted up, poised to hold air and light rather than just heavy mass. Echoing this silence is the technique of sgraffito, a word borrowed from the Italian for to scratch. Picture a red clay pot coated entirely in a layer of white liquid slip. The surface is a blank, snowy canvas. Now, take a sharp needle tool and scratch through the white layer. Like magic, the dark red earth beneath is revealed. It is drawing by removal, creating an image through the contrast of layers. The tool makes a soft scratching sound, a rhythmic scritch-scratch that feels incredibly satisfying to the ear. The artist carves patterns of vines, fish, or geometric stars, and with every line, the truth of the clay body underneath is exposed. It is a reminder that beneath the surface presentation, the core material remains unchanged. The contrast between the matte, scratched lines and the smooth, untouched areas creates a tactile map for the fingers to read, a story written in relief that invites the hand to explore the landscape of the pot even in the dark. While the light fades here, it brightens in the fluid motion of pulling a handle. A mug or a pitcher is not complete without this extension, this bridge for the human hand. A handle is not carved, it is pulled. The potter starts with a lump of wet clay attached to the side of the leather-hard cup. With a hand dripping with water, they stroke the clay downward. Gravity helps the clay stretch, lengthening it like taffy. The water acts as a lubricant, allowing the clay to slide through the grip of the fingers, thinning and tapering with each pull. It is a sensual, wet process, requiring a gentle touch. Pull too hard, and it breaks. Pull too softly, and it remains thick and clumsy. The final form often bears the long, subtle indentation of the potter's thumb, a frozen gesture of comfort that fits perfectly against the thumb of the drinker who will hold it years later. It is a handshake across time, a direct connection from the maker's hand to yours. You're safe here, floating in this river of creation. Simply drift. Consider the alchemy of bone china. In the quest to mimic the pure, translucent porcelain of the East, English potters in the 18th century made a surprising discovery. They added the ash of calcined cattle bones to the clay mixture. It sounds macabre, but the fire purifies all. The bone ash creates a material of incredible strength and whiteness, allowing the walls of the vessel to be made impossibly thin. Hold a bone china saucer up to the sun. You can see the shadow of your hand behind it. It glows with a warm ivory light, capturing the sunbeams within its walls. Despite its delicate appearance, it is the strongest of all porcelain types, resilient and durable. It is a paradox of ceramics that something so fragile in appearance can be so tough in reality. It sings with a high, clear pitch when struck, a musical note that resonates with the clarity of the material itself. Far from the refined workshops of porcelain, we return to the primitive roots of the earth with pit firing. Before kilns were built of brick, the earth itself was the oven. Imagine a large, shallow pit dug into the ground, lined with sawdust, dried manure and copper wire. The pots, unglazed and burnished until they shine like smooth stones, are nestled into this bed of combustibles. A bonfire is built over the top, roaring into the night sky. As the fire burns down to embers, the pots bake in the suffocating heat of the earth. There is no glaze to melt, only the smoke searching for a home. The smoke penetrates the porous clay, painting it with clouds of black, grey and brown. The copper wire fumes flashing the surface with sudden streaks of pink and orange. When the pots are dug out of the cold ashes the next morning, they look like they have been retrieved from a volcano or the bottom of the ocean. They carry the landscape on their skin, the patterns of the fire, the ghosts of the burning leaves, the memory of the earth's heat. This connection to the skin of the earth is refined in the technique of terra sigillata. The name means sealed earth in Latin. It was the technique of the ancient Roman potters, who created vessels with a surface as smooth and soft as wax, without using a drop of glaze. They achieved this by separating the very finest particles of clay, the microscopic platelets that float on top of water, and applying them to the surface of the pot. When these tiny particles are polished with a soft cloth or a piece of leather, they align perfectly, like shingles on a roof, creating a surface that is watertight and incredibly smooth to the touch. It feels like touching a polished river stone, warm and organic. It gleams with a soft satin sheen, not the hard, glassy reflection of a glaze, but a gentle glow that seems to come from within the clay itself. It is the earth, refined to its most elegant essence, sealing itself against the world. Finally, we contemplate the sherd. In the dust of history, whole pots are rare. What remains are the fragments, the broken pieces, the shards. Archaeologists sift through the sands of time to find these jagged memories. A single shard can tell the story of a civilization. The curve of a rim can reveal the size of the vessel. The temper in the clay can pinpoint the riverbed where it was mined. The soot on the exterior can tell us what was cooked for dinner 3,000 years ago. There is a melancholy beauty in a sherd. It is a survivor. It has outlasted the hands that made it, the house that held it, and the culture that used it. It rests in the dirt, a durable witness to the daily life of the past. Holding a sherd is like holding a key to a forgotten room. It connects us to the universal human need to make, to store, to hold, and to leave a mark that says, "I was here." The broken piece is not the end of the story. It is the punctuation mark that allows the sentence of history to continue. And as you drift deeper, the fragments of your own day settle into the soft earth of your mind, becoming quiet, becoming history, becoming rest. The jagged edge of a sherd, resting in the silt of a forgotten riverbed, carries a weight far beyond its physical mass. It is a fossil of human intent, a fragment of a world that once breathed and hummed with the same vitality we feel tonight. As we leave the broken pieces of the past to settle into the cool, dark loam, we find ourselves drawn toward the source of their strength, the strange and beautiful geometry of the crystal. Within certain glazes, if the cooling process is slowed to a glacial pace, the minerals begin to grow. They are not painted by a brush, they are birthed by the kiln. Imagine a surface of deep, midnight blue, where sudden star-like bursts of zinc or titanium appear. These are crystalline glazes. As the temperature drops degree by painful degree, the molecules align themselves into intricate snowflake-like structures that catch the light and hold it captive. They look like frozen flowers or the frost on a window pane in the dead of winter. To achieve this, the potter must be a master of patience, holding the kiln at a specific searing temperature for hours, allowing the crystals to bloom in the silence of the furnace. It is a slow, silent explosion of geometry, a reminder that even in the heart of a fire there is an inherent order seeking to emerge. The stillness of these crystalline flowers leads us naturally into the meditative world of the Korean moon jar. Picture a vessel so large it requires 2 people to carry, yet it appears as light as a cloud. These jars, crafted during the Joseon dynasty, are not perfectly symmetrical. They're made by joining 2 large hemispherical bowls at the centre, creating a visible seam, a waistline that speaks of their construction. They're glazed in a white that is not the clinical white of modern paper, but the warm, milky white of a harvest moon seen through a thin veil of mist. There is a profound humility in the moon jar. It does not demand your attention with bright colours or intricate patterns. It simply exists, occupying space with a quiet, unassuming dignity. To look at one is to feel the air in the room grow still. Its slight irregularities, the way it leans just a fraction of an inch to one side, the subtle variations in its snowy surface, make it feel alive, as if it is breathing in the moonlight it so beautifully mimics. It is a monument to the beauty of the almost perfect, a vessel for the soul to rest within. And as the soft light of the moon jar fills your mind, your thoughts begin to drift like embers on a breeze. You are deeply relaxed, and every word brings you closer to a perfect, heavy slumber. The ethereal glow of the moon gives way to the gritty, primal roar of the Anagama kiln. This is an ancient type of pottery kiln brought to Japan from China via Korea in the 5th century. It is a long, sloping tunnel built into the side of a hill, resembling the tail of a dragon. Unlike modern kilns that use gas or electricity, the Anagama is fueled entirely by wood, thousands of pounds of split pine and hardwood. For days and sometimes weeks, a team of potters stokes the fire around the clock, never allowing the temperature to dip. But the wood is not just fuel, it is the decorator. As the logs burn, they release clouds of fine wood ash that swirl through the kiln like a scorching wind. This ash settles onto the bare clay of the pots, and at extreme temperatures it melts. It fuses with the silica in the clay to create a natural ash glaze, a rugged, drippy coating that ranges from a crusty brown to a glassy, translucent green. The path of the flame is recorded on the surface of the vessel. One side might be scorched red by the direct heat, while the other is buried in a drift of grey ash. It is the art of the ordeal, a testament to the endurance of both the clay and the humans who tend the fire. This raw, unrefined energy finds a quiet, domestic echo in the slipware of Old England. Imagine a heavy earthenware platter, its deep red body covered in a thick, creamy coating of liquid clay called slip. Before the slip dries, the potter takes a trailing bottle, essentially a small bladder with a quill, and draws patterns across the surface. They create loops, lattices, and wavy lines that look like the icing on a cake. There is a folk-like honesty to slipware. It was the pottery of the farmhouse and the tavern, meant to be used, bumped, and lived with. The patterns are fluid and jaunty, reflecting the rhythmic movement of the potter's wrist. When the clear lead glaze is applied over the top, the yellow slip glows with a buttery warmth, making the simple act of eating a meal feel like an occasion of sunlit comfort. It is a tactile history of the kitchen, of hands reaching for bread, of the clatter of life in a world lit by candlelight. The texture of this domestic warmth leads us to the concept of hand feel, or what the Japanese call tezawari. In the world of the tea ceremony, the way a bowl feels in the hands is just as important as how it looks to the eyes. Close your eyes and imagine lifting a bowl. Is it light and surprisingly airy, or does it have a grounding, satisfying weight? Is the surface smooth like a polished stone, or does it have a slight sandy tooth that stimulates the nerves in your fingertips? A great potter considers the architecture of the rim, where the lips meet the clay. It must be comfortable, inviting the user to linger over their drink. They consider the heat retention. A thick-walled bowl will keep the tea warm while protecting the hands from the scald. This is the invisible dimension of pottery, the conversation between the object and the body. It is a sensory bridge that anchors us in the present moment, turning a simple ritual into a profound experience of touch and temperature. And as you feel the phantom weight of the clay in your palms, your muscles let go of the day's tension. You're sinking deeper into the soft blankets of your own mind. The weight of the bowl reminds us of the sheer scale of the Monte Testaccio in Rome. It is not a natural hill, but a mountain of pottery. Rising over 100 feet high, it is composed entirely of the fragments of an estimated 53 million olive oil amphorae. For centuries, the Romans discarded these one-way shipping containers here, stacking them in a careful, engineered fashion to prevent landslides. Walking upon this hill today is walking upon the literal debris of an empire's appetite. The shards are so numerous that the soil itself is more ceramic than earth. It is a vast, silent library of commerce. Each fragment carries a tituli picti, an ancient barcode painted in ink that tells us the weight of the oil, the name of the merchant, and the farm where the olives were pressed. It is a staggering reminder of the permanence of ceramics. While the oil was consumed in a week and the merchants have been gone for 2 millennia, the clay remains, a mountain of evidence that refuses to vanish. From the mountains of Rome, we drift to the delicate blue-tinted shadows of jasperware. Created by Josiah Wedgwood in the late 1700s after thousands of failed experiments, this is a stoneware that can be coloured all the way through the body. The most iconic is Wedgwood Blue, a serene robin's egg hue that evokes the clarity of a spring sky. Imagine a vessel of this matte, unglazed blue, decorated with exquisite white bas-reliefs of classical figures. These white figures are not painted on. They are moulded separately and sprigged, delicately applied by hand using only a touch of water. The result is a crisp, sculptural contrast that looks like carved marble or a cameo. It is the height of neoclassical elegance, a marriage of industrial innovation and timeless grace. The surface is so fine-grained that it feels like the skin of a peach, cool and velvety, a texture that seems to absorb the noise of the world around it. This quiet elegance is shattered and then reborn in the ritual of wabi-sabi. This is the Japanese aesthetic that finds beauty in the imperfect, the impermanent, and the incomplete. In pottery, wabi-sabi is the crack in the glaze, the warp in the rim, the thumbprint left by the maker. It is the antithesis of the factory-made identical object. A wabi-sabi vessel does not hide its age. It wears its repairs like medals of honor. It understands that nothing lasts, nothing is finished, and nothing is perfect. When you hold such a pot, you are holding a piece of the truth of the universe. It encourages us to find peace in our own flaws, to see the beauty in the weathering of our own lives. It is a philosophy of acceptance, a soft place for the weary mind to land, knowing that there is a profound dignity in simply enduring. As the philosophy of acceptance washes over you, your heart rate slows to a steady, peaceful rhythm. You are safe, you are held, you are drifting. Leaving the philosophy behind, we enter the physical rhythm of the kick wheel. Before motors, the potter's own body provided the power. Imagine a heavy weighted flywheel at the base of a vertical shaft, with the potting head at the top. The potter kicks the flywheel with their foot, building up a rhythmic momentum. Kick, glide, kick, glide. There is a beautiful biological synchronization that happens here. The speed of the wheel is tied directly to the potter's heartbeat and the strength of their leg. The wheel becomes an extension of the body. When the potter needs more torque for a heavy piece of clay, they kick harder. When they need a slow, delicate spin for a rim, they let the momentum fade. It is a dance of physics and flesh, a low-tech harmony that produces vessels with a soul that a motor-driven wheel can rarely match. The hum of the heavy stone wheel is a lullaby, a spinning song of the earth. Finally, we arrive at the spirit hole. In many indigenous pottery traditions, particularly among the Mimbos people of the American Southwest, a beautiful and haunting practice was observed. When a person passed away, a ceramic bowl, often decorated with stunning black and white geometric animals, was placed over the head of the deceased. But before it was placed, a small hole was carefully punched into the centre of the bowl. This kill hole was not an act of destruction, but of liberation. It was believed that the bowl had a spirit just as the person did, and by breaking the bowl, its spirit was released to accompany the soul of the departed into the next world. Looking at one of these bowls today, the hole in the centre acts as a portal for the eye. It is a reminder that the vessels we create are not just for holding water or food. They are vessels for our beliefs, our hopes, and our transition from this world to the next. They are the artifacts of our humanity, shaped in mud and frozen in fire, waiting to tell our story long after we have returned to the earth. And as the spirit of the clay rises, you find yourself rising into a dream, light as air, yet grounded as stone, drifting into the deep, dark kiln of sleep. The portal of the spirit hole, that intentional fracture in the ceramic skin, allows the soul to pass through. Yet as we drift further from the rituals of the end, we find ourselves drawn back into the roaring heart of the beginning. Imagine the kiln at its most violent, at the white-hot peak of its journey, where the air inside is no longer just air but a swirling incandescent soup of energy. It is here that the potter performs a strange, ancient ritual, tossing a handful of common, coarse sea salt into the furnace. Listen to the sound of it. A sharp, crackling hiss as the salt crystals strike the heat. In an instant, the salt vaporizes, turning into a caustic, ghostly mist of sodium that billows through the chambers. This vapor is hungry. It searches for the silica, the sand, within the clay of the pots. When they meet, a chemical marriage occurs in mid-air. The sodium and silica bond, creating a unique glaze that was never applied by a brush. It forms a texture known as orange peel, a delicate dimpled surface that catches the light in 1,000 tiny crystalline shadows. It is a rugged, atmospheric finish, a record of a storm of salt and fire that raged in the dark. The pot emerges with a glassy sweat, a permanent armour that feels slightly gritty, slightly pebbled, a tactile memory of the sea transformed by the flame. This atmospheric dance, this chemical joining of elements, is only possible because of the hidden minerals sleeping within the earth. Chief among them is feldspar, the most abundant mineral on our planet, yet one that carries a secret, magical property in the world of pottery. Visualize a handful of crushed granite, grey and unremarkable. This is the source of feldspar. In the language of the kiln, it is a flux, a diplomat that facilitates the impossible. Pure silica, the primary ingredient of glass, requires temperatures far higher than most kilns can reach to melt. But when the feldspar is present, it acts as an invitation. It lowers the melting point of the surrounding minerals, allowing the stubborn sand to soften and flow. It is the glue of the ceramic world, the invisible architect that turns a pile of dry dust into a solid, vitreous stone. Every glossy plate, every sturdy mug owes its existence to this silent geological worker. It is the bones of the earth, surrendering its rigidity to the heat so that a new form can be born. And as the minerals soften and flow, your own thoughts begin to soften, melting away the sharp edges of the day. You are safe in this warmth, sinking deeper. While some pots require the chaos of salt or the diplomacy of minerals to shine, others find their glow in a process of pure meditative friction. This is the art of burnishing. Imagine a pot that is leather hard, firm enough to hold, yet still holding the coolness of moisture. The potter does not reach for a glaze. Instead, they pick up a single perfectly smooth river stone, worn down by centuries of water. With a slow, rhythmic motion, the stone is rubbed against the clay, back and forth, back and forth. The pressure of the stone compresses the microscopic plate-like particles of the clay, laying them flat and aligned, like the shingles on a roof or the scales of a fish. Slowly, the matte, dull surface begins to transform. A soft, deep luster emerges, not a superficial shine, but a glow that seems to come from within the very heart of the clay. It is a laborious, soulful process, a skin-to-skin contact between the earth of the pot and the stone of the river. The finished piece feels like silk or polished wax, a surface that begs to be touched, inviting the hand to trace the path of the potter's patience. It is a reminder that beauty does not always need to be added. Sometimes, it only needs to be pressed out from within. The texture of this hand-polished stone leads us into the quiet, echoing spaces of the mould maker's studio. Here, we encounter slip casting, a technique that feels more like alchemy than sculpture. Imagine a heavy white block of plaster carved into the negative shape of a graceful picture. The plaster is bone-dry and thirsty. The potter pours a liquid clay, known as slip, into the void of the mould. As the slip sits, the plaster begins to drink. It pulls the water out of the liquid clay, causing a thin, solid wall of earth to build up against the interior of the mould. After a precise number of minutes, the potter inverts the mould, pouring out the remaining liquid. What is left behind is a hollow shell, a ghostly inhabitant of the plaster's heart. This is how the most impossibly thin, perfectly uniform vessels are created. It is a process of waiting and suction, a birth that happens in the dark, where the clay takes on the memory of the space it occupied. When the mould is finally opened, the object appears like a secret revealed, smooth, damp, and perfectly silent. This smooth, white canvas of the cast form provides the perfect foundation for the vibrant, sun-soaked world of Majolica. Born in the Mediterranean and perfected in the Renaissance, Majolica is a celebration of colour over shadow. Picture a vessel first dipped in a thick opaque white glaze made from tin. It is a powdery, chalky surface, like a fresh fall of snow. While this snow is still raw and unfired, the artist begins to paint. They use metallic oxides, cobalt for a blue that rivals the sea, copper for a lush forest green, and manganese for a deep, earthy purple. The brush must be confident and swift. The dry, thirsty glaze drinks the pigment instantly, and no stroke can be erased. When the pot is fired, the white base melts into a glossy, milk-like glass, and the colours bloom and sink into it, becoming permanent, luminous, and rich. A Majolica plate is like a window into a garden that never wilts. A captured moment of artistic bravery where every movement of the brush is preserved forever in a coat of glass. And as the colours of the garden fill your vision, your breathing becomes a slow, steady rhythm, a peaceful tide. You're letting go. Yes, drifting further. Behind every great vessel, whether painted or burnished, lies a simple, essential tool, the potter's rib. It is a small, kidney-shaped object, often made of smooth wood, flexible rubber, or polished steel. Its name is a literal legacy. In the dawn of pottery, the actual rib bones of animals were used for this purpose. Imagine the potter at the wheel, one hand inside the spinning vessel, and the other hand holding the rib against the exterior. The rib acts as a firm, unyielding surface, smoothing away the rhythmic ridges left by the human fingers. It compresses the clay, driving out excess water and strengthening the walls. As the wheel spins, the rib coaxes the clay into a sharp mathematical curve, a perfection of form that the soft pad of a finger can never quite achieve. It is the bridge between the organic and the geometric, a tool that has been held by human hands for 10,000 years. When you see a pot with a surface as clean and taut as a drum, you are seeing the work of the rib, the silent partner in the dance of the wheel. While the rib provides the outer shape, the clay itself possesses a mysterious internal quality known as ceramic memory. It sounds like a poetic metaphor, but it is a rigid fact of material science. At a microscopic level, clay is composed of tiny hexagonal plates. When a potter pulls a handle or stretches a bowl, these plates are forced into new positions, creating a state of internal tension. If the clay is forced too quickly, or if it is dried unevenly, it remembers its original state. In the intense heat of the kiln, as the minerals begin to soften and become slightly flexible, the clay may try to return to its previous alignment. A handle might warp, a perfectly round rim might overlyse, a crack might appear where the clay felt most stressed. The potter must learn to negotiate with this memory, drying the pieces slowly in damp closets to allow the tension to resolve peacefully. It is a reminder that the earth has its own will, a silent history that must be respected if the form is to survive the fire. This memory of the clay even extends to the stars. Through a phenomenon called archimagnetism, ancient pottery acts as a compass that points through time. Within the clay are millions of tiny particles of iron oxide, microscopic needles of magnetite. When a pot is fired to a high temperature, these iron particles become mobile. They align themselves perfectly with the Earth's magnetic field at that exact moment in history, pointing toward the magnetic North Pole. As the pot cools and hardens, these needles are frozen in place, locked forever in their orientation. Because the Earth's magnetic poles are constantly wandering and shifting, scientists can measure the magnetic signature trapped inside an ancient kiln or a discarded shard to determine exactly when the fire was lit. A simple cooking pot from 3,000 years ago becomes a geological record, a frozen heartbeat of the planet's magnetic core, proving that the earth beneath our feet and the vessels in our hands are part of the same spinning story. The atmosphere in which this story is told is determined by the breath of the kiln, the balance between oxidation and reduction. Imagine the fire inside the kiln. In an oxidation firing, the fire has all the oxygen it needs to burn clean and bright. The minerals in the glaze react with this oxygen to produce clear, predictable colours. But then, the potter may choose to reduce the kiln. They close the dampers, choking the air supply. The fire becomes starved and desperate. It begins to hunt for oxygen wherever it can find it, even pulling oxygen atoms directly out of the clay and the glazes. This chemical theft, this reduction, completely transforms the landscape. The common red iron oxide, stripped of its oxygen, turns a deep stony black or a pale ghostly celadon green. A copper glaze that would be green in an oxidation fire suddenly blushes into a vibrant oxblood red. The kiln becomes a laboratory of atmospheric pressure, a place where the absence of air creates a beauty that can be found in no other way. And as the air grows still and the fire settles, your mind finds its own quiet centre, a place of perfect balance. You're sinking, drifting, almost there. Finally, we arrive at the moment of vitrification, the ultimate destination of the fire's journey. This is the threshold where the earth ceases to be earth and becomes glass. As the temperature reaches its peak, the silica within the clay melts and flows, filling every microscopic pore, every tiny void between the mineral grains. The pot begins to shrink, tightening in on itself as it becomes increasingly dense. When vitrification is complete, the vessel is no longer a collection of particles. It is a single, fused, crystalline structure. It is now non-porous, meaning it can hold water forever without a single drop seeping through its walls, even without a glaze. It has reached a state of geological permanence. If left undisturbed, a vitrified vessel will last as long as the mountains from which its minerals were born. It is the triumph of the human spirit over the ephemeral mud of the riverbank, a piece of the earth, refined by fire and rendered eternal. The journey of the clay is a journey towards stillness, and as the vitrified stone rests in the cooling dark, so do you. The ultimate destination of the fire's journey, that state of eternal vitrification, is not reached by chance, but through a silent, bending witness known as the pyrometric cone. Imagine, inside the searing orange atmosphere of the kiln, a small, slender triangle of clay and mineral standing perfectly upright on a shelf. This is not a decoration, but a sacrifice to the heat. As the temperature rises, the cone does not merely measure the heat, it measures heat work, the cumulative effect of time and temperature together. Watch it in the mind's eye through the glowing spy hole of the kiln. As the kiln reaches its peak, the tip of the cone begins to soften, losing its rigidity and bowing gracefully toward the shelf. It is a slow, elegant surrender. When the tip touches the clay below, it signals that the chemistry of the glaze has been fully realized, that the minerals have danced long enough in the flame. It is the potter's most trusted guide, a humble piece of geometry that speaks the language of the fire when the eye cannot bear to look. This bowing of the cone, this surrender to the invisible pressure of the atmosphere, happens upon a stage of immense silent strength. Beneath every vessel in the kiln lies the kiln furniture, the heavy white shelves of cordierite or silicon carbide that must withstand the same punishing temperatures as the pots without warping or melting. These shelves are the bedrock of the ceramic world. They are refractory, meaning they are stubborn, unyielding, and resistant to change. Imagine the heat trying to break them, to make them sag, but they remain perfectly flat, holding the weight of 100 bowls. They're coated in a thin layer of kiln wash, a powdery white mixture of flint and kaolin that acts as a protective shield. If a glaze runs off a pot in a molten stream, it hits this powder and stops, prevented from fusing the vessel to the shelf forever. It is a layer of protection, a boundary that ensures that even in the height of the transformation, things remain separate, held, and safe. And as these heavy shelves support the weight of the work, you feel your own weight supported by the bed beneath you, sinking down. Let the tension drift away into the floor. You are grounded. The stubborn strength of the kiln shelf provides the foundation for the delicate, velvety world of underglaze. Unlike the glassy glazes that melt and flow, underglazes are essentially liquid clays loaded with high concentrations of pigment. Picture a pot in its green state, still raw and unfired. The artist applies the underglaze with a soft squirrel hairbrush. Because there is little flux in this mixture, it does not move in the fire. The stroke you make is the stroke that stays. It is a material of absolute fidelity. You can paint fine, tapering lines, the whiskers of a cat, or the delicate veins of a leaf, and they will emerge from the kiln exactly as they were laid down. The colour is matte and deep, like charcoal or dried rose petals. It is the skin beneath the glass, a layer of raw expression that waits for a clear glaze to be poured over it, which will eventually act like a magnifying lens, bringing the colours to life with a sudden, startling depth. This layering of intention, the application of one substance over another, is often defined by what is not there. The dance of wax resist. Imagine a potter taking a brush dipped in liquid, melted wax, and painting a pattern onto the bottom of a bowl or across its side. The wax sinks into the porous clay and hardens instantly. Now the entire bowl is dipped into a vat of wet liquid glaze. Watch the water bead up and roll off the waxed areas like rain off a duck's back. The wax resists the glaze, keeping the clay underneath pristine and bare. In the heat of the kiln, the wax simply vanishes, burning away into a ghost of smoke, leaving behind a crisp, clean silhouette of the raw earth. It is a lesson in the power of boundaries, that by protecting certain parts of ourselves, we allow the patterns of our true nature to shine through the decorations of the world. While the wax creates sharp boundaries, the ancient technique of combing or feathering invites the layers to bleed into one another in a rhythmic liquid blur. Picture a flat slab of wet clay flooded with a thick layer of white slip. While the white is still fluid, the potter trails. Parallel lines of dark chocolate brown slip across it. Then, using a single fine needle or even a stiff feather, they draw the tool across the lines at a right angle. The slips are pulled along the path of the tool, creating a series of soft, repeating peaks and valleys. It is the same pattern you might see in a marble cake or the surface of a fine piece of stationery. It is a mesmerizing, fluid geometry, a record of a single, steady movement through a liquid landscape. The eye follows the waves, up and down, back and forth, finding a deep hypnotic peace in the repetition of the form. Echoing this fluid rhythm is the structural grit of grog. To the casual observer, grog is just sand or ground up bits of already fired pottery. But to the potter, it is the muscle within the clay body. Imagine a smooth plastic clay that feels like butter. It is beautiful, but it is weak. It sags under its own weight and shrinks violently in the kiln. By adding grog, the potter introduces a skeleton of grit. Feel the texture in your mind, a slight sandy tooth that gives the clay standing power. Grog provides tiny channels for the steam to escape during firing, preventing the pot from exploding. It acts as an internal scaffolding, allowing the potter to build taller, wider, and bolder. It is the rough truth hidden inside the smooth surface, the necessary friction that allows the vessel to hold its shape against the pull of gravity. And as the grit provides strength to the clay, you find strength in your own stillness. Your breath is a slow, steady tide. Rising and falling, you're perfectly at ease. With this inner strength provided by the grog, we can begin the slow, rhythmic journey of coiling. This is perhaps the most ancient and meditative way to build a form. There is no wheel here, no humming motor. There is only the potter sitting on the ground, rolling long snakes of clay between their palms. Roll, stretch, roll. The coils are even, round, and cool. They are laid down in a circle, one atop the other, and then pinched together with the thumb and forefinger. It is a slow, spiraling growth, like the building of a nest or the winding of a shell. Each coil adds a fraction of an inch to the height. There is no rush. The potter moves around the vessel, or the vessel turns slowly on a wooden board. It is a process of accumulation, a steady, heartbeat-like repetition that turns a pile of ropes into a voluminous jar. The surface often retains the rhythmic indentations of the potter's fingerprints, a tactile braille that tells the story of the time it took to create. While coiling is a journey of circles, slab building is a journey of planes and architecture. Imagine a large flat sheet of clay, rolled out like dough with a heavy wooden pin. It is smooth, vast, and even. The potter uses a needle tool to cut shapes from this sheet, squares, rectangles or complex polygons, as if they were pieces of a garment or the walls of a house. These slabs are then scored, scratched deeply along the edges, and joined together with a thick muddy slip that acts as a structural glue. To build with slabs is to think in 3 dimensions, to fold the earth like paper. It allows for sharp corners, flat faces, and boxy industrial forms that the spinning wheel can never mimic. It is a quiet, constructive process, a way of folding the softness of the earth into the rigidity of a structure, creating a space for the air to dwell within. This space, this interior void, is sometimes protected by a sagger. In the early days of coal-fired kilns, the atmosphere was dirty, filled with soot and fly ash that would ruin a delicate glaze. To protect the pots, they were placed inside saggers, lidded boxes made of heavy, fire-resistant clay. Imagine a kiln filled not with pots, but with these mysterious sealed canisters. Inside the sagger, the atmosphere is private. The pot is shielded from the direct blast of the flame, but contemporary potters have turned this protection into a tool for creation. They fill the sagger with organic materials, seaweed, copper wire, salt, or even fermented fruit. In the heat, these materials vaporize, and because they are trapped inside the box with the pot, they fume the surface, painting it with ethereal, smoky colors that look like the surface of a distant planet or the nebula of a star. It is a secret world within the fire, a vessel within a vessel, where the atmosphere is thick with the ghosts of the sea and the forest. The light of these smoky nebulas leads us finally to the crowning jewel of the ceramic process, the overglaze or enamel. This is the final, most delicate layer of all. After a pot has been fired to its highest temperature, after the glaze has melted and the clay is vitrified, the artist may add one more touch. Overglazes are made of minerals mixed with oils and fired at a very low, gentle temperature, just enough to fuse them to the surface of the existing glass. This is where we find the lustres, the precious golds, silvers and mother-of-pearl finishes. Imagine a brush applying a liquid that looks like dark balsamic vinegar. In the cool, gentle fire of the third firing, the oils burn away, and a microscopically thin layer of pure gold is left behind. It is so thin that it follows every microscopic texture of the glaze beneath it. It catches the light with a sudden, metallic flash, a crowning touch of opulence that speaks of the sun and the stars. It is the final word in the story of the pot, a shimmering, iridescent veil that marks the end of the labour and the beginning of the object's life in the light. And as the gold catches the last light of the day, your eyes grow heavy. The world is a shimmering, soft blur. You're drifting into the golden silence of sleep. As the golden silence of the lustre fades, we find ourselves returning to the warmth of the primary earth, the humble and ancient realm of earthenware. Visualize a sun-drenched courtyard in the Mediterranean, where rows of terracotta pots glow with a deep ochre radiance. Earthenware is the oldest and most widespread of the ceramic families, fired at the lowest temperatures of the kiln. Because the heat is relatively gentle, the clay particles do not fully fuse together. They remain slightly apart, leaving a network of microscopic pores. This porosity is a living quality. In a terracotta garden pot, the walls breathe, allowing air and moisture to move through the clay to the roots of the plant. If you were to touch your tongue to an unglazed earthenware sherd, it would stick, thirsty for the moisture. There is a soft, thudding sound to this clay when struck, a muffled note that speaks of its connection to the soft topsoil of the world. It is the clay of the commoner, the clay of the cooking pot and the roof tile carrying a warmth and an approachability that feels like a long, slow afternoon in the sun. And as you breathe in the scent of sun-warmed earth, your shoulders drop away from your ears. The weight of the day is lifting. You're becoming as light as the air within the clay. The softness of the earthenware gives way to the enduring stony strength of stoneware. If earthenware is the sunlit garden, stoneware is the deep grey bedrock of the mountain. Fired to much higher temperatures, the minerals in stoneware begin to vitrify, closing those thirsty pores and creating a material that is dense, heavy, and incredibly durable. Imagine a sturdy, salt-glazed crock in a colonial cellar, holding preserves or cool water. Stoneware is the workhorse of the pottery world. It possesses a rugged, natural beauty, often appearing in shades of buff, grey, or toasted brown speckled with iron spots that bloom like freckles on the skin. It feels substantial in the hand, a grounding weight that promises to last through generations of use. It is the material of the everyday ritual, the morning coffee mug that retains its heat, the heavy mixing bowl that sits firmly on the counter. It is a material that has found its centre, a stone reborn from mud, offering a sense of permanence and reliability in a world that often feels too fast and too fragile. The density of the stone leads us, by contrast, to the ethereal, haunting purity of porcelain. Known for centuries as white gold, porcelain is the aristocrat of the ceramic world. It is composed of a very specific clay called kaolin, mixed with patunts, or pottery stone. Visualize a vessel so thin it appears to be made of frozen cream, held up against a window. The light passes through the walls, revealing the delicate silhouette of your fingers on the other side. Porcelain is a material of extremes. In its raw state, it is notoriously difficult to work with, short, stubborn, and prone to collapsing if it absorbs too much water. It demands a master's touch, a perfect balance of firmness and delicacy. But once it survives the intense white-hot fire of the kiln, it becomes the strongest and most translucent of all ceramics. It is non-porous and ringingly resonant, a material that feels like it belongs more to the world of light than the world of earth. It is the height of human technical achievement in clay, a pursuit of perfection that results in an object that feels as if it were whispered into existence rather than made by hand. This pursuit of perfection, whether in porcelain or stoneware, begins upon a humble foundation known as the bat. In the world of the potter's wheel, the bat is a circular disc made of wood, plastic or plaster that is attached to the metal wheelhead. Imagine the potter placing this disc down, securing it firmly so it becomes part of the spinning machine. The clay is then thrown directly onto the bat. The bat serves a vital protective purpose. When a large or delicate piece is finished, the potter does not have to risk touching the soft, wet walls to move it. Instead, they simply lift the entire bat off the wheel, carrying the vessel to a shelf to dry in safety. It is a removable stage for the drama of creation. For the potter, the bat represents a boundary of space, a defined circle within which the universe is being formed. It is a stable floor for the spinning dance, a silent supporter that holds the work during its most vulnerable hours, ensuring that the symmetry achieved on the wheel is preserved as the clay begins its slow transition toward the air. While the bat provides the floor, the act of centering provides the soul. This is the most hypnotic and demanding part of the process. Imagine a raw, chaotic lump of clay slammed onto the center of the spinning wheel. It wobbles and fights, an off-balance mass that threatens to fly apart. The potter leans in, using the weight of their entire body, their elbows braced against their thighs, their hands forming a firm, unyielding cage around the clay. The struggle is physical and mental. You must be stronger than the clay, yet more fluid than the movement. Slowly, through the application of steady, relentless pressure, the wobble begins to fade. The clay stops fighting. It suddenly becomes still, appearing to be a solid, motionless pillar even as the wheel spins at high speed. This is the true center. At this moment, the potter and the clay are in perfect alignment. The noise of the world falls away, replaced by the humming vibration of the wheel and the profound, silent peace of a world in balance. It is a moment of pure yes, a realization that from this point of stillness any form is possible, and as the clay finds its center, you find your own. A quiet point in the middle of the spin. You're calm, you're centered, you're at peace. From the intense focus of the center, we move to the subtractive grace of trimming. After a pot has been thrown and allowed to dry to the leather-hard state, it returns to the wheel to be refined. Picture the vessel turned upside down, held in place by small lugs of wet clay. The wheel spins, and the potter holds a sharp metal loop tool against the bottom. The tool begins to bite into the clay, and suddenly, long curling ribbons of earth begin to fly off. It is like the peeling of an orange or the sharpening of a pencil. This is where the foot of the pot is born. The potter carves away the excess weight, defining the curve of the base, creating a graceful pedestal that lifts the vessel up and gives it a sense of lightness. The sound of the tool is a soft, rhythmic hiss, a satisfying shave that reveals the final, elegant proportions of the form. The trimmings pile up on the wheel like spirals of chocolate, soft and cool. It is an act of pruning, removing everything that is not the pot, leaving behind a form that is balanced, intentional, and ready to meet the fire. The refinement of the form is often followed by the ritual of attachment, the process of scoring and slipping. Imagine a mug that needs a handle. The handle and the mug have been made separately, and now they must be wedded into a single entity. The potter takes a needle tool or a fork and scores the surface, scratching a cross-hatched pattern into the clay where the two pieces will meet. It looks like a small patch of Velcro carved into the mud. Then a thick liquid clay called slip is applied to the scratches. This slip acts as a structural glue seeping into the grooves. When the handle is pressed onto the mug, the scored areas interlock, and the slip creates a permanent molecular bond. It is a delicate operation. Too much pressure will deform the cup, and too little will cause the handle to fall off in the kiln. The potter carefully smooths the seam with a damp tool, blending the two parts until they appear as if they grew together. It is a ceremony of joining, a reminder that even the most complex structures are built from smaller, simpler parts, held together by the right mixture of friction and moisture. In the modern studio, this process of centering and trimming is often aided by a clever mechanical embrace known as the Giffen grip. Imagine a device with 3 sliding padded arms that sit atop the potter's wheel. As the potter rotates the top plate, the arms move inwards simultaneously, gently and perfectly gripping the upside-down pot. The Giffen grip is a tool of efficiency and precision. It eliminates the need for the lugs of wet clay used in traditional trimming, allowing for a much faster setup. It feels like a mechanical hand, holding the vessel with a firm but gentle touch, ensuring that even the most irregularly shaped piece can be centered for the trimming tool. For many potters, there is a deep satisfaction in the clicking sound of the arms moving into place, a sense of mechanical order that contrasts beautifully with the organic unpredictability of the clay. It is a bridge between the ancient craft and modern engineering, a tool that allows the artist to focus entirely on the curve of the line and the weight of the foot. While the tools provide the form, the first real transformation happens in the bisque firing. This is the first fire, a slow and steady climb to a temperature that turns the fragile dried mud into a porous pinkish or buff-coloured stone. Visualise the kiln heating up, driven by a computer or a careful human hand. At around 1000 degrees Fahrenheit, a magical event occurs, the quartz inversion. The silica crystals in the clay rearrange themselves, expanding slightly and locking together in a permanent change. The clay is no longer green. It can no longer be recycled by adding water. It has become bisqueware, strong enough to be handled and glazed, yet porous enough to drink in the liquid glaze like a sponge. When you touch a piece of bisqueware, it feels dry and slightly dusty, with a high-pitched metallic ring when tapped. It is a state of transition, a half-baked world where the object has gained its permanent shape but has not yet found its final skin. It is the skeletal stage of the ceramic journey, a durable ghost of the potter's intent. And as the heat of the first fire settles into the clay, you feel a warm glow settling into your own limbs. You are becoming solid, you are becoming calm, you are resting. Finally, we contemplate the invisible danger and the breathtaking resilience of thermal shock. Imagine a ceramic vessel being heated or cooled too rapidly. Ceramics are excellent at holding heat, but they are poor conductors of it. If one part of a pot expands or contracts while another part stays still, the internal tension becomes too great to bear. Crack. This is the sound of thermal shock, a sudden, jagged fracture that can split a vessel in two. It is the reason why a hot dish from the oven should never be placed on a cold marble counter, and why the kiln must be cooled with extreme patience, often taking as long to cool down as it did to heat up. But this fragility is also a source of beauty. In techniques like raku, the potter deliberately courts thermal shock, pulling red-hot pots into the cold air to create specific crackle patterns. It is a lesson in the nature of change, that rapid transition carries the risk of breakage, but it also carries the potential for unique and startling beauty. The pot that survives the shock is a vessel of proven strength, a survivor of the extremes, holding within its walls the memory of both the fire and the frost. As the temperature of the world around you reaches a perfect steady balance, your mind finds its own still point. The tensions of the day have fractured and fallen away, leaving only the smooth, quiet centre of sleep. The jagged fracture of the thermal shock remains a memory, a scar on the surface of the earth. And yet, sometimes, the clay chooses to pull away from itself even before the crackle of the cooling air. Imagine a glaze that refuses to settle, a liquid skin that, in the heat of the kiln, begins to bead up like water on a freshly waxed car. This is known as crawling. It happens when the bond between the glaze and the clay is interrupted, perhaps by a thumbprint of oil, a stray speck of dust, or a glaze applied too thickly. As the heat rises, the surface tension of the molten glass becomes so great that it draws inward, retreating from the edges, huddling in thick rounded islands. It leaves behind exposed patches of the raw matte bisqueware. In most cases, this is a potter's heartbreak, a flaw to be sanded away. But in the world of Shino glazes, this crawling is an invited guest. It creates a texture like lichens on a stone, or the mountainous terrain of a distant moon. It reveals the vulnerability of the body beneath the armour of the glass. The eye wanders through these gaps, moving from the glossy white heights of the glaze to the deep, toasted orange of the exposed clay. It is a reminder that even in rejection, there is a rhythm, a pattern of withdrawal that can be as beautiful as the embrace. And as the glaze pulls back into its quiet islands, your thoughts pull back from the world, retreating into the soft, warm centre of your own stillness. You're breathing slowly, deeply, yes. The texture of this retreat leads us by an opposite path to the indulgent, excessive world of gloop glazes. If crawling is a withdrawal, gloop is an exuberant overflow. Imagine a glaze so thick, so laden with minerals and clay, that it no longer flows like water, but moves like slow, cooling lava. It is a modern movement in ceramics that defies the traditional thin, even coat. These glazes are applied in heavy, frosting-like dollops, often in vibrant neon colours or pastels that look like coral reefs or melting ice cream. In the kiln, the gloop does not merely melt, it sags, it drips, it forms long, bulbous stalactites that hang from the rim of a vessel. It creates a highly tactile, three-dimensional landscape that challenges the hand to hold it. It feels soft and rounded to the eye, though it is as hard as stone to the touch. It is a celebration of the material's viscosity, a playful rebellion against the rules of the fine porcelain tea set. It is the clay's way of saying more texture, more colour, more weight. To look at a gloop pot is to feel a sense of abundance, a richness that overflows its boundaries, much like the way a dream overflows the boundaries of the waking mind. This sense of overflow, of a form that refuses to be contained by a simple circle, brings us to the technique of the thrown and altered vessel. Imagine the potter at the wheel, having just completed a perfectly symmetrical, perfectly round cylinder. The wheel stops, the hum fades. Now, the potter does something that feels like a violation. They reach out and squeeze. The soft, wet walls of the cylinder yield. The circle becomes an oval. The potter might push out from the inside with a wooden rib, creating rhythmic undulations that look like the sway of a torso or the movement of a wave. They might take a wire and cut the vessel into sections, reassembling them to create a form that is jagged, architectural, and surprising. To alter a thrown form is to introduce the human element of becoming into the mathematical perfection of the wheel. It breaks the mechanical ego of the machine. The pot becomes a body. It has a front, a back, a slouch, a posture. It leans into the light, a unique individual that started as a circle, but chose to be something more complex, more organic, and more true to the irregular beauty of life. While the hand alters the form, the tool creates a rhythm of its own through the chattering mark. Visualize the potter holding a long, flexible metal tool against a leather-hard pot as the wheel spins at high speed. Instead of holding the tool steady, the potter lets it bounce. Tick, 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 tick. The tool catches the clay and is thrown back, only to fall again in a perfect repeating interval. The vibration travels up the potter's arm, a rhythmic pulse that feels like a heartbeat. On the surface of the clay, this bouncing creates a series of small rhythmic divots, a staccato pattern of shadows that wrap around the vessel like the scales of a fish or the bark of a cedar tree. It is a visualization of frequency, a record of a tool's rhythmic vibration through space and time. The eye follows these marks around and around, caught in the repeating loop, finding a deep hypnotic satisfaction in the mathematical precision of the accident. It is a visual lullaby, a texture that hums even in the silence, and as the rhythm of the chattermark pulses in your mind, your own pulse slows to match it, a steady, calming beat. You're sinking, further still, into the rhythm of the earth. The vibration of the hand leads us back to the heavy, mechanical churning of the pug mill. Before the potter can dance, the clay must be purged. Imagine a massive iron machine, its internal augers turning with a slow, relentless power. This is the industrial heart of the studio. The potter feeds scraps of dried clay, failed pots, and raw earth into the hopper. Inside, the blades chop, mix, and compress the clay, forcing it through a narrow opening. What emerges is a sausage of clay, dense, perfectly mixed, and free of air. It is the process of rejuvenation, where the old and the broken are ground down and reformed into something new and ready for the wheel. The smell of the pug mill is the concentrated scent of the deep earth, damp, mineral, and ancient. There is a profound comfort in this recycling, a knowledge that in the world of pottery, nothing is ever truly lost. Every failure is merely raw material for the next creation, a cycle of death and rebirth that is as steady and inevitable as the turning of the seasons. While the pug mill prepares the clay to survive the wheel, overfiring is the danger that awaits it at the end of the journey. Every clay body has a melting point, a threshold where the minerals transition from being a solid stone to a liquid glass. Imagine a potter who, in pursuit of the ultimate heat, leaves the kiln on just a few minutes too long. Inside the furnace, the pots begin to bloat. Tiny pockets of trapped gases expand, creating blisters on the surface of the clay like bubbles in boiling tar. If the heat continues, the very structure of the pot collapses. A tall, elegant vase may begin to sag, leaning over like a wilted flower, or in extreme cases melting into a puddle of molten glass on the kiln shelf. This is the ultimate surrender of the form, the moment where the earth returns to its primordial liquid state. It is a reminder of the fragility of all things, that even the most durable stone has a temperature at which it must let go and flow. It is a beautiful, terrifying collapse, a white-hot lesson in the limits of endurance. Echoing this collapse is the delicate, paper-thin world of ceramic decals and lithography. This is where the ancient craft meets the precision of the printing press. Imagine a sheet of special paper, printed with intricate, colourful patterns using mineral-based inks. The potter takes this decal and soaks it in water. The thin, transparent film slides off the paper and is laid onto the surface of a finished glazed pot. Using a soft rubber squeegee, the artist smooths out every air bubble, ensuring a perfect bond. When the pot is fired for a third time at a low temperature, the film disappears and the mineral ink sinks into the softened glaze, becoming a permanent part of the glass. This allows for details that a brush could never achieve: photographs, delicate scripts, or the fine lines of an architectural drawing. It is the marriage of the mechanical and the handmade, a way of tattooing the earth with the imagery of our modern world. The surface remains perfectly smooth, but it carries a depth of information, a layer of memory that floats just beneath the glassy surface, like a dream held in a crystal ball. This precision is contrasted by the chaotic, atmospheric beauty of soda firing. Much like the salt firing we explored before, soda firing involves introducing a chemical into the kiln at the height of the heat. But instead of raw salt, the potter uses a mixture of soda ash and bicarbonate of soda, often dissolved in water and sprayed into the kiln as a liquid mist. Visualize the interior of the kiln as a storm of white-hot vapour. The soda ash billows through the chambers, landing on the pots in soft, unpredictable clouds. It creates a glaze that is gentler than salt, often resulting in a flashing of colours, sudden blushes of peach, orange and soft grey on the raw clay. It brings out the life in the earth, highlighting the iron spots and the textures of the potter's touch. The surface of a soda-fired pot feels like the skin of a nectarine, smooth, yet with a subtle organic grain. It is a record of the wind inside the fire, a vessel that has been painted by the breath of the kiln itself, unique and unrepeatable. While the soda vapour settles onto the clay, your worries settle into the earth. You are grounded, you're here, and everything is as it should be. The texture of this atmospheric skin leads us to the silent, intimate world of ergonomics. Have you ever wondered why a particular mug becomes your favourite? It is not just the colour, but the secret dialogue between the object and your body. Imagine a potter holding a finished mug, testing the weight, feeling the way the handle fits the curve of the fingers. A well-made handle is a bridge of comfort. It is placed so that the centre of gravity is balanced, preventing the mug from tipping in the hand. The lip of the vessel is tapered just so, allowing the liquid to flow smoothly without dripping. The base is wide enough to be stable, yet narrow enough to feel elegant. This is the invisible art of pottery, the engineering of intimacy. A potter thinks about the warmth of the tea travelling through the walls to your palms, the way the rim feels against your lips, and the way the weight of the piece anchors you to the table in the quiet moments of the morning. It is a gift of care, a piece of the earth shaped specifically to serve the human form with grace and kindness. Finally, we arrive at the most sacred and humble part of the studio, the sacred dust. In the world of pottery, dust is a constant companion. It is the dried remains of our work, the silica and clay particles that float in the shafts of sunlight. But this dust carries a danger, the risk of silicosis, a hardening of the lungs from breathing the earth. Because of this, the potter's most important ritual is the wet sponge. Imagine the end of the day. The wheel is still, the pots are covered. The potter takes a large yellow sponge dripping with water and begins to wipe down every surface. This is not just cleaning, it is an act of preservation and respect. The water captures the dust, returning it to the mud, keeping the air pure and the lungs clear. The sound of the wet sponge against the table is a soft rhythmic shuck-shuck, a final lullaby for the studio. It is the closing of the circle, the return of the dry and the scattered to the wet and the unified. It is a cleaning of the mind, a wiping away of the day's debris, leaving behind only the clean, damp silence of the coming night. And as the wet sponge wipes away the last of the dust, your mind is wiped clean of its burdens. The air is clear, the world is quiet. You are resting in the purity of the silence. The damp silence left by the wet sponge on the studio table invites a different kind of scale, a shift from the individual vessel to the shelter that contains it. Imagine the clay not as a cup or a bowl, but as the skin of the city itself, the terracotta roof tile. Picture a hillside in Tuscany at dusk, where thousands of curved earthen tiles catch the fading light, glowing like the scales of a resting dragon. These tiles are made of the same coarse, iron-rich earth as the garden pot, but they are shaped by the pressure of history and the need for protection. They are heavy, sun-baked, and designed to interlock in a rhythmic, repeating wave. As the rain falls, the water dances over these ceramic plates, a percussive symphony that has echoed over human heads for 3,000 years. The tiles are porous, yet they shed the storm. They are brittle, yet they withstand a century of winters. In the heat of the summer, they breathe, keeping the air beneath them cool and still. To look upon a sea of terracotta roofs is to see the collective patience of 1,000 potters, a vast tiled landscape that turned the mud of the riverbank into a permanent canopy for the human spirit. This vast architectural strength finds its microscopic counterpart in the hidden trauma known as the S-crack. While a roof tile covers a house, the base of a bowl must support its own world. Imagine the potter's wheel stopping after a long session. At the very centre of the floor of the bowl, deep within the compression of the clay, a tiny, invisible tension is born. If the potter does not press down firmly enough during the centering and opening of the clay, the particles remain disorganized, like a crowd without a leader. As the pot dries, it shrinks. The edges pull away from the centre, and the centre pulls away from itself. A jagged letter S begins to form in the very heart of the base. It is a slow-motion fracture, a silent scream of the material as it tries to reconcile its own density. It is often not revealed until the final fire, appearing as a ghost beneath the glaze, a reminder that the foundation of any form requires the most intense attention. The S-crack is the clay's memory of a moment of neglect, a physical testament to the truth that what happens in the centre determines the fate of the whole, and as the centre of the clay finds its resolve, your own centre becomes heavy and warm. Anchored to the present, you are settling into the deep, supportive layers of your own rest. The texture of this internal fracture leads us to the very pigment of the earth, the presence of hematite. This is the iron oxide that gives the clay its primal, blood-red hue. It is the same mineral that paints the surface of Mars and the dust of the Australian outback. Imagine a handful of raw red clay. It feels oily, dense, and ancient. In the fire of the kiln, the iron undergoes a series of chemical transformations. In an oxidizing atmosphere, it remains a brilliant rusty red, the colour of a setting sun. But if the potter chokes the fire of its oxygen, the hematite is reduced to magnetite, turning the clay a stony, prehistoric black. It is a colour that feels heavy, a colour that resonates with the core of the planet. Iron is the heartbeat of ceramics. It provides the speckles in a stoneware bowl, the celadon green of a Chinese jar, and the deep mahogany of an English teapot. It is a universal thread, a mineral bridge that connects the tools in our hands to the stars that forged the iron in the first place. When you hold a red clay pot, you're holding a piece of the cosmos, slowed down and cooled into a form you can touch. The rich, bloody hue of the iron leads us to the delicate, secretive art of mishima. This is an ancient technique of inlaying, a way of hiding a story within the skin of the pot. Imagine a leather-hard vessel, its surface smooth and dark. The artist takes a fine needle and carves an intricate pattern, perhaps a flight of cranes or a tangle of plum blossoms deep into the surface. Then, the secret is applied. A liquid slip of a contrasting colour, perhaps a brilliant white or a deep cobalt blue, is flooded into the carved lines. At first, the pot looks messy, covered in a thick, muddy layer of slip. But then, the potter takes a metal rib and begins to scrape. Slowly, the excess slip is shaved away, and the original surface of the pot is revealed. But the carved lines remain filled, glowing with the new colour. It is like a tattoo for the earth, an indelible drawing that is flush with the surface. It is a process of revelation through removal, a reminder that the most beautiful truths are often those that are etched deep and then polished until they are a part of the very fabric of being. While Mishima hides the pattern within the line, the techniques of Neryuj and Nerikomi hide the pattern within the very body of the clay. This is the art of agate-ware. Imagine a potter taking two different coloured clays, perhaps one stained with cobalt and the other a pure snowy porcelain. They are sliced, stacked, and folded over and over, like a piece of puff pastry or a Damascus steel blade. When this marbled block is sliced, a staggering pattern is revealed. Swirls of blue and white that look like the surface of Jupiter, or the veins in a piece of polished marble. In Neryuj, this marbled clay is thrown on the wheel, causing the patterns to spiral and stretch into dizzying, hypnotic loops. In Nerikomi, the slices are pressed into moulds to create geometric mosaics. The pattern is not on the pot, it is the pot. Every millimetre of the wall, from the inside to the out, carries the same intricate dance of colours. It is a marriage of materials that can never be undone, a fusion of identities that creates a new, complex whole. To look into a Neryuj bowl is to see the history of its making, a visual record of every fold and every turn of the wheel. And as the colours of the clay swirl and blend, your own thoughts begin to blur into a soft, colourful mist, floating, merging, you're drifting into the marbled light of a dream. Echoing this permanence is the potter's mark, the small stamped signature found on the foot of a vessel. In Japan, this is the chop. It is often a tiny hand-carved stone or wooden stamp that leaves a relief of a character or a symbol in the soft clay. This is the moment where the anonymous earth becomes a named creation. But the mark is more than just a name. It is a seal of responsibility. It tells the user that the potter has looked at this piece, has felt its weight, and has deemed it worthy of the fire. Some potters hide their mark inside the foot ring, a secret handshake for those who take the time to turn the pot over. Others make the mark a bold part of the design. Over centuries, these marks become the only surviving records of a life lived in the service of the wheel. A mark from the Ming dynasty, or a medieval English kiln, still speaks today. A tiny, defiant, "I was here," pressed into a piece of stone that refuses to decay. It is the human heartbeat frozen in the mud, a connection that transcends the boundaries of time and language. The mark of the maker, that small indentation of identity, is protected during the final transformation by a humble, white powder known as kiln wash. Imagine the interior of the kiln as a sacred white-walled room. Before the pots are loaded, every shelf is painted with a mixture of kaolin and flint. This is the barrier, the non-stick coating of the ceramic world. Kiln wash is designed to be refractory, to stand up to the heat without melting. Its purpose is to save the shelf from the glaze. If a pot becomes too hot and its glaze runs down like molten sugar, it will hit the kiln wash and stop. Instead of fusing the pot to the shelf in a permanent breakable bond, the glaze simply beads up on the powder. The pot can be lifted away, and the shelf remains clean. It is a layer of forgiveness, a safety net that allows for the unpredictability of the fire. It is a reminder that in any great transformation, there must be a boundary, a protective layer that ensures the vessel can change without losing its ability to stand alone. While the wash provides the silence of protection, the fired clay itself possesses a voice, the ring of the ceramic. Imagine a finished porcelain bowl, held delicately by the rim and tapped with a fingernail. Ting. It is a high, clear note, sustained and pure, like a bell. This sound is the audible proof of vitrification. When the clay particles are fused into a single, glass-like structure, they allow sound waves to travel through them with almost no resistance. An earthenware pot will thud, its porous walls dampening the vibration. But a well-fired stoneware or porcelain piece will sing. In ancient China, sets of ceramic bowls were tuned by grinding their rims, creating lithophones that were played in imperial courts. The sound is crystalline and haunting, a frequency that feels like it is clearing the air. To hear the ring of a pot is to hear the integrity of its structure. It is the music of the earth's transformation, a sonorous all is well that vibrates through the fingers and into the soul. And as the clear ring of the bowl fades into the silence, your breath becomes long and quiet, a resonant frequency of peace. You are sinking, drifting into the song of the stars. The resonance of the fired stone leads us back to the shimmering heat of the desert and the wonder of micaceous clay. Found in the mountains of New Mexico and used for centuries by the Pueblo potters, this clay is naturally loaded with tiny flakes of mica, the isinglass mineral. Visualize a cooking pot that seems to be made of hammered copper or old gold. When unglazed, the mica flakes sit on the surface, catching the light in a metallic shimmer. But mica is not just beautiful, it is a thermal miracle. The flakes of mineral act as tiny expansion joints, allowing the clay to withstand the direct heat of an open flame without cracking. This is flameware, a ceramic that can go from the fire to the table. The pots are not thrown on a wheel, but coiled and scraped into thin, elegant forms. They smell of the high desert and the cedar smoke of the fire. To cook in a micaceous pot is to engage in a slow, ancient chemistry, where the earth adds a subtle, sweet flavour to the food, and the pot itself glows with a warm, subterranean light that never fades. Finally, we arrive at the molecular mystery of glaze fit. This is the invisible dance of the coefficient of expansion. Imagine the clay body and the glaze as two dancers who must move in perfect unison. As the kiln cools, both the clay and the glass begin to shrink. If the glaze shrinks more than the clay, it becomes too tight, like a sweater that is 3 sizes too small. The tension grows until the glass shatters into a million tiny cracks. This is crazing. If the glaze shrinks less than the clay, it is too big, like a coat that is too loose. The clay pushes against the glass until the glaze literally pops off the surface in sharp, dangerous flakes. This is shivering. A perfect fit is a miracle of chemistry, where the clay and the glass contract at exactly the same rate, locked in a permanent tension-free embrace. It is a molecular harmony, a state of grace where two different substances become one, supporting each other through the transition from the white-hot fire to the cool of the night. It is the ultimate goal of the potter, to create a vessel that is at peace with its own skin, a form that is unified, stable, and ready to rest. The dance of the molecules has reached its end, the tension has been resolved, and the vessel is at peace. And as the kiln cools into the deep black of the midnight hour, so do you. The resolution of that molecular harmony between clay and glass brings a peace that is finally tested in the quiet utility of the pour. Imagine a teapot, its belly full of steaming water, resting on a heavy wooden table. The potter has spent hours, perhaps days, obsessing over the geometry of the spout. In the trade, this is often called the beak of the bird, the sharp, intentional edge where liquid meets the air. If the edge is rounded and blunt, the tea will cling to the ceramic through surface tension, dribbling down the front in a messy, frustrating stream. But watch the sharp spout of a masterfully made pot. The liquid leaps from the edge, a clean crystalline arc that breaks perfectly from the clay. It is a victory of physics. The potter has used a sharp metal tool to carve a dripless edge, a microscopic cliff that forces the water to surrender its grip and fall into the cup. It is the invisible architecture of a morning ritual, a sharp kiss to the air that ensures your tea reaches its destination in a smooth, silent stream. The light catches the curve of the water, a shimmering thread connecting the vessel to the cup, and for a moment, the world is perfectly aligned. But for every perfect spout that sings, there is a mountain of silence left behind in the waster heap. The texture of this thought leads us away from the kitchen table and into the archaeology of the kiln site. Every great pottery centre in history, from the massive kilns of Jingdezhen to the small workshops of medieval England, sits atop a crock hill. Imagine a landscape of discarded beauty. These are the wasters, pots that cracked in the fire, glazes that ran too far, or vessels that stuck to the kiln shelf. They were thrown onto the heap centuries ago, and today they form a mineral library of human effort. Walking upon a waster heap, you hear the muffled crunch of a million failed dreams beneath your boots. But to the historian, these are more precious than the perfect pieces. The failures reveal the potter's secrets. They show the thickness of the walls, the raw colour of the clay before the glaze hid it, and the fingerprints of the apprentice who loaded the kiln too quickly. They are the honest bones of the craft, a jagged, colourful history of trial and error that rests beneath the soil, cooling for eternity in the damp dark. And as the failures of the past settle into the deep earth, your own worries are settling too. They are becoming fragments, harmless, small. You are breathing in the cool, quiet air of the field. Echoing this silence is the structural mystery of paper clay. While the wasters are heavy and brittle, this modern alchemy produces forms that feel as light as a dried leaf. Imagine a potter taking a bucket of liquid clay and mixing it with a slurry of shredded paper, perhaps old newspapers or toilet tissue. It seems like a mess, a slurry of mud and pulp. But when this mixture dries, the cellulose fibres of the paper create an internal network of microscopic scaffolding. It is a biological reinforcement. Because of these fibres, the clay gains a green strength that is staggering. A potter can build structures that would collapse in ordinary clay, long spindly arms, thin sheets like parchment, or massive gravity-defying sculptures. Even more miraculous, paper clay allows the potter to join dry clay to wet clay, a feat usually forbidden by the laws of ceramics. In the kiln, the paper simply vanishes, burning away into a ghost of smoke, leaving behind a ceramic structure that is riddled with microscopic voids where the fibres once were. It is a skeletal beauty, a vessel made of air and stone, holding its shape through the memory of the trees that once gave it strength. The transition from the material to the ritual brings us to the most breathless moment in the studio, the opening. After the kiln has fired and cooled for days, the time comes to unseal the door. Visualize the potter standing before the heavy brick-lined maw of the furnace. The heat is gone, but the air still carries a warm mineral scent, the smell of baked earth and melted glass. The first brick is removed. A shaft of cool external light pierces the darkness of the kiln, illuminating the pots inside. They look different in the light of day than they did in the mind's eye. This is the moment of truth. The potter listens. In the silence, the pots are singing, a delicate crystalline tink, 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 as the glazes continue to settle and crackle in the fresh air. It is a moment of profound vulnerability and reward. Some pieces have been transformed into jewels, others have been claimed by the fire. It is a harvest of the earth and the flame, a slow-motion reveal that feels like waking up from a long, vivid dream into a reality that is even more beautiful. While the light of the kiln door reveals the form, it is the ancient alchemy of luster that captures the sun. Originating in the 9th century workshops of the Abbasid Caliphate in Iraq, luster is a technique of painting with light itself. Imagine a finished glazed vessel, already fired and cooled. The artist applies a thin film of silver or copper salts mixed with ochre and vinegar. The pot is then returned to a special kiln and fired at a low temperature in a thick, smoky atmosphere. In this oxygen-starved darkness, the smoke pulls the oxygen out of the metal salts, leaving behind a microscopically thin layer of pure metal, so thin it is transparent. When the pot is cleaned, it glows with an iridescent metallic shimmer that shifts from gold to ruby to mother of pearl as you turn it in your hands. It was the ancient world's way of capturing the fleeting beauty of a soap bubble or a beetle's wing. It is a surface that refuses to be one colour, a shimmering veil of light that sits upon the clay like a reflection on a still pond, shifting and dancing with every breath you take. While the luster catches the sun, the finger ridges on the interior of a pot catch the shadow. Imagine sliding your hand inside a tall, hand-thrown vase. Your fingertips find a series of rhythmic, spiralling grooves. These are the throwing marks, the topographical map of the potter's ascent. As the potter pulls the clay upward on the spinning wheel, their fingers leave these small, repeating ridges behind. They are the DNA of the maker, a record of the pressure, the speed, and the moisture of a single moment in time. In some cultures, these marks are smoothed away with a rib, hidden for the sake of a perfect surface, but in others, they are celebrated as the soul of the pot. They create a rhythmic shadow play on the interior, a spiral staircase for the light to climb. To feel these ridges is to hold the hand of the person who made the pot, to trace the path of their effort and the steady beat of their heart as they coax the mud toward the sky. And as your fingers trace the spiral of the clay, your mind traces a spiral of calm, winding down, deeper into the warmth of the blankets. You are safe. You are held. The texture of this human effort leads us by the weight of gravity to the slow surrender of slumping. Imagine a bowl that has been fired just a few degrees too hot, or a clay body that has been mixed with too much flux. In the white-hot intensity of the kiln, the clay begins to lose its rigidity. It becomes pyroplastic, a state between solid and liquid. Gravity, ever patient, begins to pull. The rim of a tall vase may begin to sag, leaning over in a graceful, weary arc. A wide platter may slump in the centre, conforming to the shape of the kiln shelf beneath it. It is a collaborative sculpture between the potter's intent and the earth's pull. In modern ceramics, artists often court this collapse, placing slabs of clay over stones or glass bottles and letting the heat of the kiln slump the earth into organic draped forms that look like frozen fabric or melting ice. It is a lesson in letting go, a reminder that there is beauty in the yielding, and that even the most stubborn stone must eventually bow to the forces that govern the universe. From the sag of the form, we drift to the frost of the Shino glaze. If slumping is the heat of the sun, Shino is the quiet of a winter morning in Japan. Imagine a vessel coated in a thick, milky white glaze that looks like a drift of fresh snow over a rugged mountainside. Shino glazes are rich in feldspar, and they behave like no other glass in the world. In the kiln, the glaze traps carbon from the smoke, creating soft, grey carbon traps that look like ink wash paintings or shadows on the snow. Small spots of iron in the clay scorch through the white, appearing as bright orange or deep red hebe, the fire marks. The surface is often riddled with pinholes, tiny craters where the gases escape the clay, giving it the texture of a citrus peel or a weathered rock. To look at a Shino pot is to look at a landscape in transition, a frozen moment of winter where the fire has left its warm orange fingerprints on a world of white silence. It is a glaze that invites the mind to wander, to find shapes in the clouds and stories in the cracks. While the frost of Shino covers the surface, the cylinder remains the hidden skyscraper of every form. Every pot you see, the rounded teapot, the flared bowl, the narrow bottle, started its life on the wheel as a simple, upright cylinder. It is the primal shape, the first architectural feat of the potter. Imagine the potter opening the ball of clay and pulling the walls straight up. At this moment, the clay is at its strongest, a vertical pillar that defies the centrifugal force of the wheel. It is the blank slate of ceramics. From this skyscraper of mud, the potter can push outward to create a belly, or pull inward to create a neck. If the cylinder is weak, the pot will never be strong. It is the core of the craft, a vertical meditation on height and thickness. Every vessel carries the ghost of a cylinder within it, a hidden pillar of strength that supports the weight of the decoration and the pressure of the fire. It is the skeleton of the art, the straight line from which all curves are born. Finally, we arrive at the 0 point, the final threshold of the cooling journey, 100 degrees Celsius. As the kiln cools from its white-hot peak, it passes through many stages, but this is the most significant for the silence of the studio. Above this temperature, the water molecules are still active, still capable of expanding into steam. But as the kiln dips below 100 degrees, the last of the thermal energy settles. The pots have finished their contraction. The glazes have finished their singing. The air inside the kiln is now safe for the human hand. It is the moment of finality. The transformation is complete. The mud of the riverbank has officially become a stone of the hearth. The heat that roared like a lion is now a gentle warmth, like the breath of a sleeping animal. It is the 0 point of the process, the moment where the labour ends and the rest begins. The pots sit in the dark, finished, permanent, and silent, waiting for the light of the morning to reveal their new lives. And as the kiln reaches its final cooling rest, so do you. The heat of the day has dissipated, the steam has vanished, leaving only the cool, solid comfort of the night. You are a finished vessel. You are at peace. You're asleep. The 0 point has passed, the heat has retreated into the walls of the kiln, and in this newfound coolness, a new voice emerges from the dark. Reach out your hand in this quiet space and gently tap the rim of a finished porcelain bowl. Listen. Ting. It is a sound that is no longer earthly. It is a high, clear, sustained note that vibrates through the air like a silver bell. This is the ring of truth, the audible proof that the clay has achieved its final vitrified state. In this state, the microscopic particles are fused so tightly that sound waves can travel through the material with almost no resistance, bouncing from wall to wall in a perfect crystalline echo. It is the music of the mountain, transformed by fire and delivered to your fingertips. The sound lingers in the air, a diminishing frequency that carries with it the last remnants of the kiln's energy, fading slowly into a silence that feels deeper and more profound than the one before. While the sound provides the clarity of the soul, the breath of the kiln provides the colour of the skin. This is the world of oxidation, a state where the fire is allowed to breathe deeply, fueled by an abundance of oxygen. Visualize the kiln as a living, respiring creature, its lungs full of fresh, moving air. In this atmosphere, the minerals within the glaze find their brightest, most exuberant expressions. Copper, when bathed in this oxygen-rich warmth, turns a lush, grassy green, the colour of a meadow in midsummer. Iron oxide remains a cheerful, sunny yellow, or a warm, toasted honey. The colours are transparent and predictable, reflecting the light with a cheerful honesty. It is a clean, bright fire that leaves the clay looking refreshed and vibrant, a celebration of the air we breathe and the light that reveals the world in all its vivid detail. And as the breath of the kiln fills the space, your own breathing becomes deep and effortless, a rhythmic exchange of life. You are light, you are airy, you are drifting on the oxygen of sleep. The clarity of the oxidation leads us into a deeper, more mysterious shimmering, the world of aventurine glazes. This is not a colour painted on, but a galaxy birthed from within. Imagine a deep, saturated pool of iron-rich glaze that, as it cools, begins to crash. The minerals become oversaturated, and because they have nowhere else to go, they begin to form tiny, microscopic flakes of metallic crystals. They look like gold dust suspended in a midnight sky. To the eye, it is a surface of infinite depth. When the light catches it, thousands of tiny star-like sparks flash and dance beneath the glassy surface. It is a visual frequency that mimics the stars of the Milky Way, a celestial map captured in a handful of mud. To hold an aventurine pot is to hold a captured nebula, a shimmering reminder that the same minerals that make up the stars are the ones resting in the palm of your hand. These stars remain suspended and fixed only because of the silent structural guardian known as alumina. If the silica is the spirit of the glaze and the flux is the invitation, then alumina is the anchor. Imagine a molten glass that, in the heat of the fire, wants to run like water, sliding off the pot and puddling on the floor. Alumina steps in to say, no. It is the stiffener, the molecular glue that gives the molten glaze its viscosity, holding it against the walls of the vessel with a stubborn, invisible grip. It is the skeleton of the glass, providing durability and a high melting point that prevents the pot from becoming a puddle. On a microscopic level, alumina forms a lattice that traps the other minerals in place, ensuring that the beauty of the glaze remains where the potter intended. It is a material of immense integrity, a silent worker that ensures the vessel can survive the ordeal of the fire without losing its dignity. It is the boundary that allows the liquid to stay true to the form, a structural piece that ensures the vessel remains whole and upright. The structural piece of the alumina is tested in the shadowed retreat of reduction cooling. While most potters focus on the fire as it climbs, some find the true magic as the fire fades. Imagine the kiln as it begins its long descent into coldness. Instead of allowing the air to rush back in, the potter chokes the kiln, maintaining a reduction atmosphere even as the temperature drops. This is a dark, chemical secret. In this oxygen-starved cooling, the minerals are forced to reorganize themselves in the shadows. The iron in the clay body, unable to find oxygen, turns a deep, velvety black or a metallic gunmetal grey. The glazes take on a toasted quality, a richness that feels ancient and weathered. It is the difference between a sunny day and a moonlit night. The colours become brooding and complex, carrying a weight of history that feels like it was unearthed from a tomb rather than taken from a kiln. It is a cooling process that embraces the dark, a slow-motion transformation that turns the earth into a shadow of itself, quiet, heavy, and profound. And as the darkness of the reduction cooling settles over the clay, a comfortable darkness settles over your mind. It is a safe dark, a protective dark. You're sinking into the velvet of the night. The shadows of the night eventually give way to the human reflection, the strange and whimsical world of anthropomorphism in clay. Since the beginning of time, potters have seen themselves in the clay. We call the parts of a pot by the names of our own bodies: the lip, the neck, the shoulder, the belly, the foot. But sometimes the mimicry becomes literal. Think of the Toby jugs of England or the face jugs of the American South. Visualize a jug that has eyes, a nose, a grimace, or a smile. These vessels were often used to ward off evil or to mark the contents of a jar with the spirit of the person it belonged to. There is a haunting life to these pieces. The clay seems to be trying to breathe, trying to speak through the mud. They remind us that the earth is not just a material, but a mirror. When we shape the clay, we are inevitably shaping our own image, leaving behind a ceramic ghost that carries our laughter, our fears, and our faces long after we have returned to the dust ourselves. It is a soulful connection, a reminder that we're made of the same stardust and soil as the cups we hold. The ghost of the human form leads us to the physical reality of the memory of water. This is the quiet, invisible exhale of the clay as it dries. Imagine a freshly thrown pot, heavy with the moisture of the wheel. As it sits on the shelf, the water molecules begin to migrate to the surface and evaporate into the air. This is the drying phase, a period of immense tension. As the water leaves, the clay particles move closer together, causing the entire vessel to shrink. If the rim dries faster than the base, the pot will warp or crack, pulled apart by its own internal tides. The potter must govern this retreat, covering the work with plastic shrouds to ensure the water leaves in a slow, uniform exodus. It is a lesson in patience, a slow, rhythmic drying that mimics the falling of the tide or the quiet settling of the earth after a rain. The clay becomes bone dry, a state of absolute fragility, where it has lost its weight but not yet gained its strength. It is a moment of pure potential, a parched white landscape waiting for the first touch of the fire. While the drying clay waits in silence, the slip trailer brings the music of movement. Imagine a small rubber bulb filled with a liquid clay slip of a contrasting colour. The potter holds this trailer over a wet slab of clay and begins to squeeze. A thin, rhythmic stream of mud flows from the nozzle, like ink from a pen or honey from a spoon. The potter moves their hand in loops, spirals, and zigzags. This is slip trailing, a technique that creates a raised, tactile line that sits atop the surface. It feels like braille for the eyes. The lines are plump and rounded, catching the light in a series of soft shadows. When the pot is glazed, these lines create dams that catch the melting glass, causing it to pool and change colour at the edges. It is a playful, fluid way of drawing, a record of a single, confident gesture through space. The trailer makes a soft, squishing sound, a rhythmic pulse of creation that leaves a permanent wake in the mud, a flowing river of earth that never dries up. Echoing this fluid growth is the microscopic miracle of the crystalline flower. This is perhaps the most difficult and rewarding feat in the ceramic world. Imagine a glaze that is chemically designed to be unstable. Inside the white-hot kiln, as the temperature begins to drop, the potter does not let the kiln cool. Instead, they hold the temperature at a specific searing point for 6, 8, or 12 hours. In this stillness, the molecules of zinc and silica begin to find each other. They begin to grow from a single seed point, branching outward in a perfect fractal geometry. They look like sunflowers, snowflakes, or bursts of frost. They are not painted, they are grown. They have a shimmering, pearlescent quality that changes as you move the pot in the light. Each crystal is a unique record of the time and the temperature of the kiln's heart. They are the flowers of the furnace, a blooming of stone that happens in the dark, a reminder that even in the most punishing heat, there is a capacity for exquisite, delicate growth. And as the crystalline flowers bloom in the dark, your own dreams begin to bloom, soft, intricate, beautiful. You are drifting into the garden of the subconscious. Finally, we arrive at the final destination, the quiet resting place of the daily cup. All the fire, all the minerals, and all the labour of the wheel lead to this, a vessel sitting in your hand. Feel the weight of it. Notice the way the handle fits the crook of your finger, a space designed specifically for you. The rim is cool against your lips, the surface is smooth against your palm. This is the ultimate purpose of pottery, to bring the beauty of the earth into the intimacy of the daily ritual. A handmade cup is a companion. It anchors you to the present moment, turning a simple drink of water or a morning tea into a ceremony of connection. It carries the warmth of the potter's hands and the strength of the mountain's fire into your home. It is a humble, functional piece of art that does not ask for a pedestal. It only asks to be held. And as you hold it, you realize that the journey of the clay is complete. It has moved from the riverbank to the wheel, from the fire to the shelf, and finally to you. It is a cycle of transformation that ends in a moment of perfect, quiet service. The cup is full, the fire is out, and the journey has found its home. And as the vessel rests upon the table, you find your own final rest. The stories of the stone and the stars have become a part of you. You are heavy, you are warm, you are asleep. The final secret of the clay is not found in the fire or the wheel, but in the silence of its own molecules, the profound mystery of the silica tetrahedron. If you were to dive deep into the heart of a clay particle, past the skin, past the minerals, you would find a geometric perfection that mirrors the structure of the stars. Clay is composed primarily of silicon and oxygen, the most abundant elements in the Earth's crust, arranged in a repeating four-sided pyramid. This is the fundamental building block of the world. But here is the secret. These same molecules formed the silicate dust of the early universe, the cosmic debris that eventually coalesced into planets, and eventually into the very cells of your body. We often speak of the potter shaping the clay, but at this fundamental level, the clay and the potter are the same. We're made of the same stardust, the same elemental building blocks, held together by the same universal forces. When you touch the earth, you're reaching back through 4 billion years of history to touch your own origin. The clay is a durable record of the universe's long journey from chaos to form. It is a material that remembers everything: the pressure of the deep earth, the heat of the tectonic plates, and the gentle rhythmic pressure of your own heartbeat. In the end, pottery is the art of holding space. A bowl is not the clay itself, it is the void within the clay. It is the space that holds the water, the food, the light. This is the ultimate truth of the 101 wonders, that we too are vessels. We are shaped by our experiences, fired by our passions, and glazed by our wisdom. But our true value lies in our capacity to hold peace, to hold stillness, and to hold the silence of the night. We are the earth, reaching up to touch the sky, and for a brief, beautiful moment, we have been shaped into something that can sing. We are part of an eternal cycle where the broken shard returns to the earth only to be reborn as the clay of the future. You're a masterpiece of time, a vessel of infinite depth, resting in the quiet centre of the world's great wheel. The wheel has stopped its spinning. The hum of the stone and the motor has faded into the soft velvet dark of the room. And as this final truth settles into the marrow of your bones, you realize there is nothing left to do. No more to learn, no more to hold. Your breathing is a slow, steady tide, a rhythmic pulse that echoes the ancient tectonic cooling of the earth, rising and falling, rising and falling. Every muscle in your body has become like the clay in its most relaxed, weighted state. Heavy, soft, and perfectly supported by the ground beneath you. You are sinking into the deep, cooling kiln of the night. The fire that warmed these stories has turned to soft orange embers, and those embers are now fading into a gentle grey ash. The images of the day are blurring. The colours of the celadon, the cobalt, and the gold are washing together into a peaceful, dark sea of shadow. Yes, you are safe. You're held by the gravity of the earth, and you are letting go. The 101 wonders you have heard are not weights to carry, but feathers that have settled upon your mind, soft and light. They are part of your subconscious now, woven into the lattice of your dreams. You do not need to remember them with your waking mind, for your spirit already knows the language of the earth. You are the potter, you are the clay, and you are the silent space between. The air is cool and still, the blankets are warm and heavy. The journey is over. There is only the stillness, the silence, the perfect vitrified peace of a soul at rest. Your eyes are so heavy now, so very heavy. Let the world outside continue its frantic spin. Your spin has found its true, quiet center. You're the finished work, resting in the dark, waiting for nothing, wanting for nothing, perfectly whole. And now, 101 wonders are resting with you. Sleep now. Good night.